man who stood at her door was one of the most feared men in Makkah. He had not come alone. He never did. Behind him were the eyes and ears of the Quraysh, and behind them was the full weight of a city that had decided it would crush this new faith before it spread any further. He had come for information. He had come to intimidate, and he had chosen, perhaps deliberately, to direct that intimidation at a young woman standing alone in a house from which her father had just fled. He chose the wrong woman. Asma bint Abi Bakr was the daughter of the man who had become the closest companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. When Abu Bakr al-Siddiq made the decision to accompany the Prophet on the Hijrah, the historic migration from Makkah to Madinah, he left behind a household. He left behind his elderly father, his children, and the life he had built. And he left behind Asma, who was then a young woman, pregnant with her first child, fully aware of what her father's absence meant and what it invited. It invited exactly this: Abu Jahl at the door. According to narrations preserved by Ibn Kathir and others, Abu Jahl came to the house of Abu Bakr, demanding to know where he had gone and what he had taken with him. The question was not innocent. The Quraysh were furious at the Hijrah. They had been outmaneuvered. The Prophet and his closest companion had slipped out of Makkah in the night, and the plans the Quraysh had made, plans that were far darker than simple exile, had come to nothing. Now they wanted to know what route had been taken, who knew what, and whether they could still catch them. Asma told him nothing. Abu Jahl, by some narrations, struck her. The accounts differ slightly in their details, and we should present them with that honesty. What is consistent across the narrations is that she did not give him what he came for. She stood in that doorway carrying her child, and she did not speak a word that would endanger her father or the Prophet, peace be upon him. Think about what that required. She was not protected by tribal immunity in any practical sense in that moment. She was a young woman, alone, facing a man who had already demonstrated what he was willing to do to people who had no one to defend them. She had watched what was done to Sumayya bint Khayyat and families like hers. She knew what the Quraysh were capable of, and she still did not speak. Before the Hijrah, Asma had played another role that has been recorded with more detail. She was the one who prepared provisions for her father and the Prophet, peace be upon him, for the journey. She tore her own waistband into 2 pieces to tie the food bags, and because of this, she was given a title she would carry for the rest of her life. Dat al-Nitakhain, the one of the 2 waistbands. It was not a title given by a court or a ceremony. It was a name born from a moment of practical faithfulness, a young woman using what she had to serve a mission she believed in. The Hijrah was not only a physical journey. It was the moment the Muslim community went from being a persecuted minority in Makkah to building something in Madinah. And Asma's actions in those days, the provisions she prepared, the silence she kept at the door, were part of the foundation on which that transition stood. She would go on to marry Zubair ibn al-Awwam, one of the earliest companions of the Prophet, and among those promised paradise. By the accounts of the early historians, the early years of their marriage were marked by hardship. Zubair at that time had little wealth, and Asma worked, grinding grain, carrying date stones on her head from a distance, drawing water. Ibn Kathir records her describing this period herself, and what is striking is not the complaint in the telling, but the matter-of-factness. She had not expected ease. She had come from a family whose understanding of faith was not transactional. You did not believe because it came with comfort. Eventually, her father became the first caliph after the Prophet's passing, and Asma saw Islam go from a small, persecuted community to a governing authority spanning vast territories. She lived long enough, very long by the accounts, into her 90s, to witness both the glory and the fractures of that era. She outlived her husband. She outlived her son. Her son was Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and the story of how she met his end is one of the most devastating and dignified moments in early Islamic history. Abdullah ibn Zubayr had taken a political and military stand against the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan and held Makkah for years. When the forces of al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf finally besieged the city and the end came near, Abdullah went to his mother before the final battle. By then, Asma was nearly 100 years old, blind, and fully aware of what was about to happen. He told her he feared that if he was killed, his body would be mutilated. He asked what she thought he should do. She told him, according to the narrations, that he already knew what was right. That a man does not submit himself to humiliation to save his skin when he has spent his life standing for something. She told him to go. That death with honor was better than life on others' terms, and that she would only find comfort in him, now and after, if he chose the path of dignity. He went. He was killed. His body was indeed treated with cruelty after his death, and Asma, blind, ancient, having just sent her son to his death with her own words, bore it. Al-Hajjaj came to her afterward, by some narrations, perhaps expecting grief he could use, perhaps expecting a broken old woman. What he found, if the narrations are to be believed, was something else entirely. She spoke to him about what he had done and what it meant, with a clarity that left him, for once, without an answer. She died not long after. Some narrations place her death just days after Abdullah's. What do we take from a life this long and this full? Asma bint Abi Bakr lived through nearly the entire sweep of early Islamic history, from the days when her father was a merchant in Makkah, through the Hijrah, through the era of the Prophet, through the caliphates of her father and Umar and Uthman and Ali, through the civil wars and their aftermath into the Umayyad era, and out the other side. She was not a spectator. She was present. She prepared food for the Hijrah. She kept silence at the door. She raised a son and sent him to die rather than surrender his conviction. She spoke truth to a man who had just killed her child. There is a kind of faithfulness that does not announce itself. It just keeps showing up. In the provisions tied with a torn waistband, in the silence held at a door, in the words given to a son who needed to hear the truth more than he needed comfort. Asma bint Abi Bakr kept showing up. For nearly a century, without once, as far as the records show, choosing herself over what she believed. That is the whole story, and it is more than enough.